hope that all of you will get out to the, just as a reminder, this is a recorded conversation. And we are having conversations with the two mayoral candidates of for the Los Angeles city seat. The following questions are informed by the research and designed to educate women of the thoughts and visions of our next potential mayor. I wanted to take this opportunity as you're joining us to remind everyone that Hope is conducting our own Get Out the Vote effort from a nonpartisan goal of ensuring Latinas get out to vote in the city of Los Angeles and throughout the county, and of course throughout the state. And the campaign is named La Votante. We all use voting as our superpower, and I hope you all will as well. When you go online to latinas.org, you'll be able to download and search for your polling place, key deadlines that you need to be aware of, when to submit if you vote by mail, when to submit your vote by mail ballot, so it can be counted, and also information about how to register to vote on same-day voter registration opportunities. So please go to our website, latinas.org, and download information about La Votante and become use your incredible superpower of voting. As we wait for the Congresswoman, please also take this opportunity to put in any questions that you may have. We hope to get to your questions on the chat. We may not be able to. We do have a set of questions that we wanted to ensure that we ask the Congresswoman, and I think she's going to be joining us shortly, that we received these or we've put together these questions due to some of the research that Hope has conducted. Congresswoman, are you with us today?
I am, and I'll be on camera in just a second. How is everybody?
I think everyone's doing really good. We've been excited for this conversation.
Oh, well, good. Me too. Me too. Leadership development has always been very, very important to me, a very important commitment and principle. So hang on one second. Let me sit down and switch on that camera. You know, as women, we multitask.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I had the pleasure of taking my twin boys, Adam and Joshua, to high school this morning, and I was praying that I wouldn't have any traffic so I can get back on time. So it all worked out.
How old are
they? They're juniors in high school.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So they'll turn 16 in a couple of weeks. I can't believe it. Time flies, but you know,
almost to the finish line.
Yeah. Well, Congresswoman, thank you so much for making time to have this conversation over, I hope, a good cup of coffee. I have my coffee mug. It says Café con lucha, which of course translates coffee with a fight.
With a fight. Struggle.
Or, you know, or keeping on with the movement, right? Fighting for our movement, fighting for our rights. We have been very much looking forward to having these conversations. As you know, Los Angeles is the second largest city in our wonderful nation. It also has one of the largest populations, or the largest populations, of Latino registered voters. So we thank you for your time. We put together a set of questions, Congresswoman, that really were derived and put together from the research that Hope has conducted of various surveys and pollings over the last 5 years of how Latinas were feeling about a variety of different issues. So I thought we can start right away with one of the key ones, and that is more about your vision for the city of Los Angeles and why you're running for mayor.
Well, thank you again. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. And I hope one of these days we can sit around a table and meet in person. You know, Zoom is very efficient, but, you know, it still lacks the intimacy of a conversation. This was a big decision for me. You know, I could have taken the political career route and stayed in Congress and run for leadership. You know, I am in a relatively safe seat, although I never take anything for granted. But I decided to gamble and come home and run for mayor because I'm deeply, deeply troubled and concerned about the direction of the city. I feel like we're in a fight for the soul of our city, that we have a crisis on our streets, and that I built an organization many years ago, the last time we were in a crisis like I feel that we're in right now. And because of very bad decisions by people in elected office and appointed office, I think it contributed to the situation that we find ourselves in today. So my vision for LA is a vision of hope, a vision of unity, the diversity in our city. Everybody in the world is represented here. And I want to see our city come together to address our problems and not turn on each other. And that has happened before, and it can happen again. I have a lifelong history of building coalitions across race, class, gender, geography, and ideology. And I think that that's what is needed in our city now more than ever. And I said that, I've been saying that for over a year. And then we saw an even further reason because of what has happened on our city council. But one thing, and I'm just going to say this, and I'm sure we'll get into it, I really strongly reject the notion that what those 4 individuals did has set the city back decades. I don't believe that 4 individuals have that kind of power, and I'm not going to allow it to destroy the unity that has been built over decades.
Thank you for those words, Congresswoman. One of the things that speaking to that specific issue is that as a leadership organization, we're creating a pipeline of incredible Latina leaders. Oftentimes, the Latina community or the Latino community in general gets criticized for not having one leader that we all kind of get behind, right? But I've always thought that was our strength, because to your point, we cannot be defined by just one or even a few. We're a tremendously diverse community with a variety of different races and ethnicities that make us up. And I think that is our strength, that we have a strong pipeline of leadership. And I know leadership is close to your heart. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yes. You know, the things that people expect of us, it's like if one Black person speaks, then that's what Black people think. Even though that Black person might be Beyonce or Magic Johnson. I mean, no community has one person that speaks for them. And I think that that kind of viewpoint is born out of the ignorance of not understanding who the population is. So, and one of the things that I have loved to focus on over the years, and one of the things I'll miss about Congress, is focusing on foreign affairs. And we as an American people tend to be very ill-informed, that's a polite word, about the world. So Latinos are not all from Mexico. There is Latin America. And within Latin America, there is a diversity of countries and ethnicities and all of that. And so I think sometimes that the expectations that are put on people of color are completely unrealistic and are not reflected in the majority population, although the majority population is Latino, but you understand what I'm saying. The white population does not have a spokesperson. So why would we?
Right. And I think that, it's going back to the investment in leadership and the investment of making sure that every voice counts. And that's why it's so important to get out the vote. I did want to talk a little bit about representation, specifically Latina and women representation. As you know, our goal is to see not only parity in representation in any administration, but even trying to get those numbers up to perhaps 60%. How do you see how you're going to put together your administration, the commissioners that you're going to surround yourself? How do you see parity and equity playing out on that? And do you work through numbers, or what's your strategy to ensure fair and equal representation for women and Latinas in your administration?
Well, let me just talk for a minute about my basic philosophy in governing. And that was on a community level, and it's also been an elected office. I started as a community organizer, and one of the principles of community organizing is that when you're doing anything, you go to the people that are most impacted and you involve them, not after the fact, but while you're putting something together. And so applying that principle to your question, the way I would put my administration together is by seeking the advice and counsel and participation of organizations just like Hope and many other organizations. So I would look to you for your recommendations for people, and diversity and equity would be a part of my administration from top to bottom. So it's not just on the highest level, but it's commissions, it's on every level. But I also am a big believer in affirmative action. And to me, what affirmative action means is you act affirmatively, not passively. Because what a lot of people do is they'll say, well, I couldn't find anybody, or we put out the announcement and they didn't respond. That's passive action. Affirmative action is I went to the community and asked. I sought people out. I didn't passively wait for people to come and find me. And that's what happens to our communities. Whether you are talking about contractual opportunities, grant opportunities, jobs, procurement, what will happen is that an announcement will go out and we'll send it out to the Latino community. And then when no one responds, we'll say that they weren't interested. And I think that that's a cop-out. I think that you should act affirmatively.
Thank you for that. As you know, Hope is an organization that specifically focuses on Latinas. And one of the core issues that keep on coming up is the concern around discrimination and sexual harassment in the workplace. And we want to ensure that our next mayor really takes that to heart, that in and out of the workplace, sexual harassment and assault is unacceptable. And we all deserve collectively a work environment that is safe and provides for us to really thrive. As mayor, what specific actions would you take to safeguard women and men working inside and outside of City Hall?
Well, I mean, first of all, there will be a very clear signal from me that it will not be tolerated. Zero tolerance. But one of the things that I want to do, and this has maybe a little bit to do with sexual harassment, but overall kind of corruption. And I would put sexual harassment up under that. But what I plan to do is bring in a top expert who has already volunteered, Norm Eisen. He served as President Obama's ethics czar. And President Obama had one of the most, President Obama had the most scandal-free administration in our lifetime. And so Norman Eisen has agreed to come to LA. He's an Angelino, but he lives in DC. He's agreed to come here for several months and do a top to bottom audit to make sure that we put in as many safeguards as possible against corruption. But sexual harassment would be part of that, meaning that we have to have an ethical administration, top to bottom, training, zero tolerance. And I think that that's the best way to begin, because that sends a signal from the top that it won't be tolerated. And again, when you act passively and act like you don't know things are going on, you are as responsible. And, you know, if you think about the problems in our city, we got to get everybody invested in addressing all these folks on the street. Well, they're not going to do that if they feel that City Hall is a mess. And frankly, City Hall is a serious mess right now. And we have got to restore people's confidence in governance. And I believe that that's one of the ways to do that.
Thank you for that. Keeping on the conversation of safety for women, public safety often is discussed in not only, but often in the conversations around what is happening at the retail shops, right? What crime is looking like in our streets. But we know that most of the crime that women experience, they experience at the hand of a domestic partner. We also know that undocumented children and women are victims of sex trafficking rings. And that has come back up in our surveys and our conversations with Latinas as a major concern. How do you address that as the next potential mayor of the city?
Well, you know what, sex trafficking actually and human trafficking is an issue that I've worked on for a long time. And you know, ironically, in Congress, I work with one of the most conservative guys. He's been my partner for 12 years. And we have been championing human trafficking, sex trafficking legislation. And we did just pass a bill recently, and President Biden signed one of our other bills, you know, a few weeks ago. So it'll be a big priority for me. But here's what I'm worried about too. Excuse me. The homeless count that just came out showed a huge jump in Latino homelessness. And I know that one of the categories of people who are unhoused are women and children fleeing domestic violence. And I don't know that they've drilled down to see why the numbers amongst Latinos increase so much. But one of the things that I've heard recently by a group of Latinos that are looking at the homeless count is that people who came up during the Trump years, the unaccompanied minors and the people that came up during that time who were put in the camps and then later released are a contributing factor. I also worry about, because of the Trump years, so much anti-immigrant and fear was put out there that there might be people in those tents who are afraid of the public charge and are not receiving resources because they're afraid it might interfere with their immigration status down the line. So I'm going off a little bit because what I'm saying also applies to men, but I am concerned about this issue leading to homelessness where women are fleeing and do not have anywhere to go or feel that they can't access shelters because of immigration status.
Thank you for that, Congresswoman. A big part of this, obviously, is how our police in the city of Los Angeles respond to this.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. That's what we were talking about, police. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. No, it's a conversation, and we appreciate your insights. But with the police, there is certain communities that have a complete lack of faith in our police, and perhaps will not turn to them if they
Right.
are in these situations. How do you see building up that trust? What are some examples that you've seen from your service that you see that can be really applied across the board?
Well, yeah, and let me, first of all, back to the earlier one, the LAPD, especially Latino representation, is very, very strong right now, but not gender parity, so we definitely need to deal with that. But I've been involved for the last couple decades in crime prevention and intervention strategies. We pioneered some of these at Community Coalition that have now been refined and implemented. And so I'm calling for the investment, first of all, in some communities that trust the police and want to see an increased police presence, let's get them on the street if that's what they want. But in our communities, typically that's not the case. Our communities typically want more investment in community-based programs to prevent our kids from getting involved in crime and to prevent our kids from getting locked up. And so I'm involved in raising money to invest in those programs. Tony Cardenas and I, Representative Cardenas, he's worked on a lot of juvenile justice issues. And we've formed an alliance this year. Actually, we formed it when he got there, which was many years ago, but now we're able to target money for our districts. So we have submitted joint earmarks in his district and mine for to fund the programs that prevent crime, that also build on police community relations. And we hope to bring in several $1 million in the next few months. It might run out the clock for me, but the money will still, the money that we're trying to bring in. So I have built those kind of programs to increase police community relations and trust. And I've also supported them. So I brought funding in last year for my district, but this year, Tony and I are working together.
Thank you for that, Congresswoman. I did want to shift gears a bit and talk about the business side of ensuring that we have a city hall that's business friendly. As you know, encouraging entrepreneur growth, especially among Latinas who have such an entrepreneurial spirit. Hope advises that more government and corporate investments are needed to support Latinas and minority-owned businesses from micro businesses to scaling them to small businesses. In fact, one of our reports showed statewide that if every micro business owner, Latina business owner, was to scale up and hire just one more person, that would be over 300,000 jobs for the state of California. Jeez. So think about a jobs program, right? How do you see, as mayor, how will you prioritize and promote investments in Latina and minority-owned businesses?
So what I have heard from the business community is two things. Either LA doesn't care about business, meaning City Hall, or LA is hostile to business. And so I will have a deputy mayor for business that focuses specifically on small business development, even to the level of street vendors, because there's people out there who are street vendors who would love to be brick and mortar business. But they need to, number one, have the technical assistance to meet city requirements, but also be put on a conveyor belt so that they can build up what they need, the resources, the technical assistance, the expertise to become larger businesses. I've done this from the nonprofit side, as a nonprofit executive at Community Coalition. One of the things the coalition did was help create other nonprofits. And, a for-profit and a nonprofit do the same things, but one focuses on material, meaning money, and the other one focuses on outcomes. And the nonprofits that I've run have focused on policy outcomes. And so I think that there are opportunities, but like I said, back to my general philosophy, I also believe in affirmative action there, meaning you act affirmatively. So you seek organizations like Hope, you seek other organizations that are focusing on the development of women leaders to see which ones are interested in starting small business. We also need to do an audit of our procurement process because, there are tens of millions of dollars, actually it's probably more like hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts that go to companies outside of California. So I think that we need to act affirmatively so that contracts, people who are in our city have priority over contracts.
I appreciate that, Congresswoman. I did want to ask one additional question and then one fun question. The additional question comes from a participant that's listening to our conversation. And the question reads as, what kind of strategies do you plan to put in place to better serve the transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex communities facing homelessness, discrimination, and lack of access to care?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because one of the things that frustrates me, and again, one of the reasons why I decided to jump in this race, is because right now people are so cynical about the unhoused population. I mean, they're sick of it. We taxed ourselves twice and the problem actually got worse. And so people are to the point where some people, not everybody, fortunately, are to the point where they view the unhoused through one lens. They're all strung out on meth and they want to be out there. There are different categories of people who are unhoused. And so you got to get people off the street right away, but different categories need different responses. There's thousands of children out there that we talked about. Some are with their parents, some are not. Some are unaccompanied minors. Some of them are former foster youth that got kicked out. One of the main reasons why former foster youth wind up on the streets is because they're LGBTQ+. And they need a specific response. You can't just lump people all together and expect that you're going to be able to provide services like that. Kids, you don't put a child, to me, in housing without supervision. And middle-class people transition their kids to adulthood. It's called college. It's the dorm. That's the purpose of the dorm for 4 years. And so you send your kid to a dorm because you know that they are supervised. And so when you talk about the transgender community, there are specific needs they have. Now, I'm a former medical person, so I know about the medical needs. I've worked with transgender patients before. They have very specific medical issues. And so you don't just dump people all together. You have to have different categories of a response.
Thank you for that. So I promised you one fun question. I always think it's important to have a fun question to get a little bit of an insight of the humor of the individuals that are looking to lead us. And that fun question is, how do you take your coffee?
Non-fat latte.
Non-fat latte. I have to admit, I take my coffee, I try to keep to 2 cups. And I take it black because I just need the fuerte and the strength of it. And even as a young child, I always took it black, which is very unusual, right? You usually put a lot of cream and sugar, or for us, a lot of leche con el café. Pero,
Café con leche.
Well, Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time. We were inspired by your past work, and we wish you all the best, as we wish the other candidate, in being a nonpartisan organization. But what we really are very hopeful for the city of Los Angeles, because this is a time for hope. And we hope whatever the outcomes are of the election, that we all gather together for our great grand city of Los Angeles and ensure a prosperous future for all. So thank you so much for your time.
You are very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity, and it'd be nice for LA to have a woman mayor.
All my best. Thank you so much, Congresswoman.
Bye-bye. Thank you.